Chapter 16. Catastrophe or catastrophe. However you want to pronounce it. It depends on where you're from. Actually, no, it doesn't. It just depends on whether you can read or not. Anyways, Chapter 16, Catastrophe. I waited for him to recognize me, to say something, then remembered with a start that I was still wearing a mask. No real trouble, Mr. Thompson, said Duncan. We had a disagreement, but it's been taken care of. My father nodded. Thank you, Roger. Care to introduce me to your friend? Duncan hesitated, then said, This is Stoney. Does he need to stay here for a while? Asked my father. That's sort of up in the air, replied Duncan. We'll know later this evening. Well, why don't the three of you come join us? The discussion is pretty interesting. I have to go to the bathroom first, I said. I'll be there in a minute. Down that way and to the right, said my father. I thanked him and practically ran in the direction he was pointing. Not because I had to go to the bathroom, but because I wanted to get in touch with Broxholm again. In the bathroom, I whipped out my U-Rat and made the call. Broxholm's face appeared on the screen almost instantly. What happened? Are you all right? Slight problem. Nothing major. Good. We're in the middle of something ourselves, but I've got a fix on your location now. We'll come to get you as soon as possible. He broke off the connection. I figured they must have something pretty intense going on. I was a little worried, but I thought they could probably handle whatever it was. I wandered slowly back to the kitchen. I wasn't quite ready to sit in that group with my father and Miss Schwartz. I wanted to figure out how I felt about the idea of their dating each other first, but I couldn't. It was too weird to make sense of. Finally, I went and joined the circle. A bunch of tough-looking boys and girls, most of them older than me, were talking about how they had been treated at home, or why their parents had thrown them out. I sat and listened quietly. It was terrific to see Miss Schwartz again. She was the best teacher I've ever had, and I had forgotten how much I loved her. I know you're not supposed to say that kind of thing, but I have learned a lot from the aliens. I wondered how she would react if she knew Broxholm was on his way there that very minute. Finally, I looked at my father. He was skinnier than when I had left, and his eyes were sad, but he looked a little healthier than the memory of him that I had stumbled across once, where I was hooked into Duncan's mind. That didn't make any sense. But he looked a little healthier than the memory of him that I had stumbled across once when I hooked into Duncan's mind. What is he doing here? I wondered. The discussion was interrupted by a pounding at the door. Several people jumped to their feet. Before anyone could make it to the door, it burst open, and Broxholm staggered in. Susan lay stretched across his arms, her head hanging limply to one side. A trickle of blood ran along her cheek. Broxholm's grief and rage were clear even through his mask. Creeblin was limping behind him, her clothes torn and muddy. What happened? I cried, leaping to my feet. We were attacked, said Creeblin. I ran to them, as did everyone else in the room. My father reached out and took Susan from Broxholm's arms. Broxholm swayed for a moment. I thought he was going to fall over. Broxholm swayed. For a moment I thought he was going to fall over. Then he spotted Mrs. Schwartz. His eyes widened in surprise. She didn't know it was him, of course. He was wearing a different face than the last time she had seen him. Besides, her attention was all on Susan, though for that matter she didn't know it was Susan either. She was also wearing a mask. Bring her in here, Rod, Miss Schwartz said to my father, walking toward a corridor I hadn't been down yet. My father followed her. So did Creeblin and Broxholm. So did I. So did everyone else in the room. Please, kids, stay back, said Miss Schwartz. You can't help by crowding. Most of the kids started to draw back, but I walked on. So did Duncan. I asked you to stay back, said Miss Schwartz. He comes, said Creeblin, pointing at me. Miss Schwartz looked at me oddly, then shrugged. Come along, she said. I could tell she didn't know what was going on, but figured it wasn't worth a fight at the moment. Him too, I said, pointing at Duncan. Miss Schwartz nodded and led the way to a small room. It looked like a school nurse's office, except it didn't have as much equipment. My father placed Susan gently on the cot. He knelt next to her, put a hand on her forehead, and listened to her breathe. Miss Schwartz began dialing the phone. Broxholm started to object, then fell silent. What happened? Asked my father. We were coming to get our friend, he said, gesturing to me. We were tired, and therefore less watchful than we should have been. The riot downtown still had everyone stirred up. Gangs of young people are roaming the streets. One of the gangs attacked us. They said, There's some aliens, let's get them, whispered Creeblin. I wondered how a gang of kids could have known Broxholm and Creeblin were aliens until I realized that the gangs were probably just claiming that anyone who happened to look vulnerable was an alien in disguise, and using that as an excuse to attack. I took some pleasure in imagining what would happen to any gang that attacked Broxholm. As I've said, he's the strongest being I've ever met. I had a feeling there were a lot of sorry teenagers out there. We managed to escape, continued Creeblum, her voice bitter, but one of the boys threw a rock that hit Susan on her head. An ambulance is on the way, said Miss Schwartz, putting down the phone. It looks like you two could use some help as well. No, said Broxholm. My father and Miss Schwartz blinked at us at the strength of his reaction. No, he said again, his voice calmer. No, we're all right. He turned toward my father. How's the child? My father looked up. His face was grim, set. Not good, he whispered. It wasn't until that moment that I realized Susan Simmons might die. Don't be scared, guys. It is just a book. Ow, my knee. Chapter 17 is called Face Off. I don't know if that means face off or if it means like face off. I guess we'll just have to see, and you'll just have to watch on and like all my videos and comment and subscribe, and we'll see ya.